Welcome to the Cookbook, where we invite guests on to share the ingredients of what has helped make them the successes that they are. All of it, the good, the not so good. You're not going to find anything half-baked here. And our kitchen gets messy sometimes. That's when the fun starts. So come on and join us. Okay, so hey, there are times when we all could use a little extra help and support in our lives. Whether there's something you're struggling with or just seeking connection with other people who understand what it's like to be in your situation, Inovia Behavioral Health can help. Inovia is a subscription-based organization that provides unlimited access to a wide variety of educational, experiential, and therapeutic support groups that are led by live expert facilitators. Now, you can get 20% off your membership with the discount code Cookbook20 when you subscribe. Check it out today at inoviabh.com. Inovia, feel better. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Cookbook. I'm your host, Iris Goldfeder, and I'm super excited about our guest today, Jess Sato. Jess and I have spoken a few times, and she's just an awesome human, and I think she's pretty amazing, and I think after this podcast, you will think that she is as amazing as I do. I'm going to read her bio and then bring her on. Jess Sato is passionate about helping women globally use their unique skills, expertise, and voice to create opportunities for themselves and others. With years of leadership and entrepreneurial experience under her belt, she equips and empowers female founders to incorporate purpose and impact into their business strategy, bring it to life through robust execution planning, and use their big idea and thought leadership as their competitive advantage. And I was in one of your classes on the big idea, and that was really cool. I'm going to talk about that. In addition to her impact consulting work, Jess is a TEDx speaker coach. Over the last 4 years, she's coached a plethora of private clients, the TEDx Breckenridge and TEDx Franklin communities, to step on the stage with confidence, clarity around their big idea, and a commitment to change the world. It's pretty big. So without further ado, let's meet Jess.
Hey there, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am fantastic. Happy to be here.
Happy that you're here. I've been really looking forward to this.
Yes, me too.
So, I'm looking at your bio and TEDx Breckenridge and TEDx Franklin. Where is that?
So Breckenridge is in Breckenridge, Colorado, up in the mountains. It's a mountain community. Okay. And Franklin is actually in Franklin, Tennessee, which is just outside of Nashville. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk about that for a little bit. So, do you have like a coaching platform? Do people come to you? Do you how does that work?
So with regard to TEDx, it's kind of a combination effort. So, probably a little known fact is that when you get selected to do a TED Talk, you're actually given a speaker coach. So it's a free service that is provided. And so I've been doing that as a gift to the Breckenridge and Franklin communities for the last 4 years. And so that's one avenue. Those people come to me as part of that process. But I also work with people privately to get to the TEDx stage. So a lot of work around really clarifying their big idea, like we talked about in the workshop and some things like that. That's just one piece of clarity around what that big idea is so that they can use it in business, in their thought leadership, marketing, whatever the platform is that's best appropriate for them.
That's awesome. So I never knew that once you get selected that you get assigned a coach. That's kind of cool. So how does that work? How do you get selected? Do you submit ideas to them and they say, "Ooh, that sounds good"?
Yeah. So this is sort of interesting. Every TEDx event has its own process. So, when we talk about TEDx, the X denotes that it's a regional or local event. And so each of those X events are independently organized, which means they have their own rules, they have their own processes. So they follow largely the TED format, they follow the TED speaker guidelines, but the process of curating those events and identifying which of the speakers will be speaking on those stages varies. So most events, I'll say, are speaker applications. And in fact, I got a call this afternoon from a client who has been trying to get on the TED stage, and she's on the short list for one that's coming up in the Denver area, which I'm super excited about. And so there's all kinds of variability in the application process, everything from the kinds of questions they ask. Do you need to submit a speaker reel? Do you need to submit an audition video? Is it an audition that's live? So there's a lot of variability there, but there's sort of some core things like, what's your big idea? Why are you the right person to do this talk? How is it relevant to whatever local community you happen to be applying to? Other events are 100% curated. So that's sort of the two extremes. In fact, there's a big event up in DC that is a women's focused event, and it is 100% curated. So they identify the speakers based on their own criteria, which is hard to know. And they select the speakers. They reach out to them. They bring them onto the stage. So there's like I said, a lot of variability between events, which makes it good and challenging because you just never know quite what people are looking for. And even if you follow the process to a T, even if you have the best idea, even if it is like perfectly matched to the theme of the event, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get selected. There's just a lot of other factors that are part of that process.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, so now we have a little back end look at the TEDx process.
Yes.
Cool. So talk about you. Let's talk about your journey and where all things Jess started.
Yeah. Gosh. Okay. Well, we're not going to go back to the beginning because that'll be like
beginning,
way too long.
No, her butt was slapped.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. So I'll start professionally. I found myself, right out of college at a big aerospace company in the US and really fell in love with facilitation work, decision making, strategic planning. All of that stuff was what I did in the very first part of my career. And, was doing work on behalf of the company for the US government and for the military, and then transitioned into doing leadership development work. And that's where sort of like my passion for helping people grow and develop into the best leaders and entrepreneurs that they could be really came to life. And so I've basically spent the last decade and a half helping, close to 2 decades now. Gosh, okay, see, that's why we're not going all the way back.
Yeah.
Is spent about the last 2 decades really supporting leaders in their growth and development. Everything from, how can we be a good manager to the people below us? How can we lead effectively? How can we grow our business with, efficiency and, really optimize the work that we're doing? How can we be strategic in our thinking and make sure that we're aware? All of that stuff really came to life in my corporate career that then transitioned over into a consulting practice. And so over the last couple of years, that consulting practice has morphed and changed from away from corporate clients to more focused on female entrepreneurs, which is really where my heart is. Like I just found that the longer I worked in corporate, the more disconnected I felt from people and the ability to actually create change. Wow. So it's like, you would go into corporate, you would do the work. It was good work, but because of the institutions and the structure, sometimes it's just really hard to get real change to take place. And I wanted to be more connected to people. And so started a company that was really focused on, or shifted my company away from those corporate clients to really serving female founders. And that has morphed a couple of times to now focusing almost exclusively on female social enterprises and really getting them to think critically about the business in addition to the impact that they're making.
That's awesome. And, it's funny because I had somebody say last week that, your podcast is like anti-corporate. And I said, no, it's actually not.
Right.
People's experiences are people's experience. I had somebody on here who loved corporate. Actually, Jennifer Urezio loved corporate. She was like, I loved my job. My boss, had my back all the time. So we're not anti-corporate.
fortunately, there were a lot of, situations in corporate that had people walking away from it. So it's not the podcast, it's the people, and and I find a lot of people feel very stymied by corporate. They can't do the things they want to. So the fact that you were able to do that, but the fact that now you're focusing, I love what you're doing now, because I think it's so, I don't think people realize the impact that they can have. And for you to be able to show them that, not only show them that, but guide them to, hey, this is what you could be doing. I think that's huge, because I think we all, with our voice, we never know who's going to hear our message when they need to hear it, right? So
that's absolutely right. It's funny you mentioned, I'll jump back to the impact and the voice piece in a second, but I do have to acknowledge, like Jennifer, I actually left my corporate years, and I only left because I needed a lot more flexibility in my life, and I just didn't have it. And so I needed to find a different way. Mm-hmm. And I was able to take the work that I was doing in corporate that I love so much and just plop it into a completely different vehicle, which is, to be honest, I never imagined being an entrepreneur. That was never on my radar. I was on the path, like pretty much all of us, go to college, get the corporate career, climb the ladder, et cetera. And, that was really fantastic. It really worked for me until it didn't. And then I was looking for an alternative solution, and entrepreneurship sort of fell into my lap. So I agree, it's not so much that we need to vilify corporate. There are real reasons why corporations are important. And I think they serve a really powerful purpose, especially in the impact space, right? When I think about helping entrepreneurs create impact, it's not just small businesses. Big corporations are helping close gaps that the government and other nonprofit organizations, non-governmental organizations, they just can't do. And so I see it as all of us are in this together. And if we can all focus our attention on, addressing some of these big problems that we're facing as a global community, that's where the magic really happens. And we all have a role that we can play in that process.
Right. And that's the beauty of it. And I think that people don't, I don't think they realize the power that they have, right? I think that a lot of, especially women, and we always talk about this in the dames, right? Women always, felt that we had our voices needed to be small. They haven't met the dames. And, and now, we want to be heard, but not only do we want to be heard, we want to be heard because we have something to say, and the things that we say can have a really big impact on pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And I had somebody on a few weeks ago, and, she was almost like, it's so weird because I almost wasn't going to do the podcast, but then something told me to do it. And I said, well, something told you to do it because somebody needs to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, 100%.
And I don't have tens of thousands of listeners. I have a couple of thousand, but whoever's out there hearing us talk, they're going to get a nugget that is going to be meaningful to them. And they were listening to the right thing at the right time. Yeah. So how do you, I don't want you to give the secret sauce away, but how do you, how do you guide your, I'm trying to think of the right way to word it, but, how do you guide people to their impact, so that they can see, oh, wow, I can have impact.
Yeah. So I tend to think of these as impact curious business owners. And they are people who want to make an impact. They recognize that they could, but maybe aren't sure how. So what I like to do, especially if they already have an established business, is to get them to think about two things. What is the thing that they care the most about? The social thing that they want to see change, whether that's, pay equity for women, DEI related initiatives like education, literacy. I mean, it could be anything, right? What is that thing that they care about? And really recognizing why they care about it and what kind of change they want to see. So we kind of get clear on what is the actual impact. And then the second piece is, how do we link it to the business? And that's where I think people get lost. They're like, okay, I care about this thing. It's just this thing over here that I kind of volunteer with. I donate to causes. Those are important things, and I don't want to minimize those. But I do believe that we can tie the kind of impact we want to see and the change we want to see in our local communities and beyond to the business. And the way we do that is we look at, what does the business exist to do? What are the processes, the skills, the approaches that you take already to serving clients, to delivering your products and services, that we can kind of merge together. So for example, if you are a tech company and you recognize that there is a big problem with, lack of tech literacy or something along those lines in your local community. Maybe you live in an underserved community or work near one. All of a sudden now you can bring the unique skill set that you have, which is tech, the ability to leverage tech, to use tech, to code, whatever that might be, and bring it to your local community in the form of workshops, access to actual machinery that allow you to do, like, you can see how you can start to tie these pieces together, and now you're moving forward. And so I think some of it's just taking a step back and getting clear on, okay, what do I care about in the world? What do I want to see the world, in the world that needs to look different? And then how can I tie that to the business using what I already have, using our expertise, using our skills, using, pro bono in some cases, consultation, et cetera. Like, there's just so many ways that we can bring these pieces together and start to make an impact little by little. It doesn't have to be like this massive initiative. It can start very, very small.
Right. And I love that. I have a not-for-profit, and we tackle, we help organizations that tackle social issues in our community.
Yeah.
And we don't raise we raise like $10,000 maybe each year, which people are like, well, that is a lot of money. But to me, I want to raise like more and more. But I think it's more the awareness, because people don't, they didn't know about Six Alarm Peer Support, that there was an organization in town that helped with the mental health of, first responders.
Yeah.
And we've done other things. We choose an organization every 2 years.
Okay.
So we keep them for 2 years, and then we, go on. But I think for me, that's, and I know that it's not with my business, but for me, it was a really big way of giving back to the community. When I was young, I was homeless. And it was really funny because in this community, they have a homeless shelter. Yeah. But I never felt the calling to volunteer there. Now, the shelter that helped me in New York, I would volunteer there all the time. I mean, I would like give whatever I could give and whatever. And, but for some reason, I just didn't feel the calling here. What ended up being the catalyst or the impetus was this woman, Marcia Gentry, was severely abused by her ex-husband, and thought she was going to die, because he pretty much told her she was going to die. Wow. And then he killed himself. But I heard her story and I was like, oh my God, like, I have to do something. So I think when something touches you, that's when you take action.
Yeah, absolutely.
People have to feel that impact, because when I felt that, I knew what I had to give. It was clear.
And I think what you're talking about here is really important, and is what, when I talk about impact as a competitive advantage, this is exactly what I mean, right? When we talk about the things that we're most passionate about and kind of bring our stakeholder community, people in our ecosystem into that with us, all of a sudden there's a direct emotional connection. We can see that there is something human about the person in front of us. Yeah. And I don't think, a lot of times I think our businesses create this barrier to the connection that we need with clients. So when we talk about why we do the work we do, when we talk about the kind of impact that we want to have, when we talk about, issues that have happened in our childhood or whatever, now all of a sudden we're not just the CEO, we're not just this blank face behind the computer screen, we're actually human. And it galvanizes people to us, right? Like that to me is why I love talking about impact, because it makes you human and it humanizes the work that you're doing. No longer are you just, a website, a person on a mission to create real change, positive change, or to mitigate negative things that are happening in your local community and beyond. And that to me is where the magic is, right? And I think when we embrace this idea as impact as the competitive advantage, all of a sudden everything shifts, because the right people who align with you are coming to you in a way that maybe they weren't before, because you were just this person. Now you're a person on a mission, and I want to be a part of that.
Very cool. And it's interesting because for me, it's about the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I know at some point, in order for me to work on my business and not in my business, I'm going to have to figure out a way to kind of balance that, because, I was talking to Krista last night and she kills me. But, one of the things was that I'm at this scaling point. And I wrote about it in the Dames, where I was like, oh my God, this and that, I thought it was going to be, and all the things I have to have all the systems and all the things in place. But for me, it was more than that, because as I scale, I still want to maintain those relationships.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want 100 people that I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd rather have like 30 or 40 people that I do know. Right. And that, I can hire somebody at some point to handle all the operations, then I can handle all the relationship piece. That's kind of what I'm looking at doing. Because at the end of the day, for me, it is the humanity of it. It's the user experience. It's the putting the human into the business. I think so many businesses are just numbers.
Yeah.
It's like we want 5,000 clients and we don't ever have to see them. And maybe most like our really big clients we'll take out and whatever, and we'll fly them to Aruba. But other than that, I don't need to know them. And it's like, no, what made me do this in the first place, I thrive. Like I just thrive off of relationships. And that's my passion. That's why I do it. That's why I do this.
Yeah.
It's all connected. So, yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I've been thinking a lot about how do we, this is the rub with social impact and social entrepreneurship, right? We have a mission. We want to be connected to the people that we're serving or the beneficiaries of the work. And yet we also need to make money. And there's a disconnect, I think, sometimes with people, because they're like, okay, I really want to focus on the impact. I really want to have the relationship. And the result of that is that we don't do the things that we need to do in the business. And so I like that you're already trying to find your own way of like making this work, recognizing, okay, I really like the relationship part. It's really important to me to be forward facing with my clients. I want to know them and I want them to know me, which means now we offload those things that are not going to allow you to do that. Whereas there are other people who are like, I just really want to run this business and I want to make sure that strategically we are making the impact. And so I'm going to bring the right people in to help me do that, right? That's the beauty of entrepreneurship, right? It gives us the flexibility and the freedom to be able to decide, like, how do we do this thing and make the impact that we really want to make? So I love that you're exploring, what that might look like for you and like doing it on your terms, right? I mean, if we think about why most of us leave corporate, it's because we need to do it on our terms.
Mm-hmm.
And entrepreneurship does allow us to do that, which I think is amazing.
Right. Well, I think the other part of that, right, is I guess for me, I was always a little small company that did websites, we did SEO, we did all the things, and that was it. And it was money in, money out, and that was it. And now it's so much more than that. And there was like there was a saying that with women, when we grow, that we're basically trained to stay down. So when we grow, we kind of sabotage ourselves to get back down to where we're supposed to be. And with me, it's like, bring it on.
Yeah.
I just keep going, bring it on. Okay, bring it on. Let's go. Let's go for the ride and, see where it goes. And that's kind of where I'm at now. And it's the fun part is figuring all the things out. I think for me right now is like, I was overwhelmed. I think when I realized that I was scaling and I had to do certain things, I was like having a meltdown that day. I was like, holy shit, I need a CRM. I need to use a payment thing. I need to do this. I need to automate things. I didn't ever want to automate things, but now, and it was like this whole thing. And after like Jen Kochen and a few people talked me off the ledge, which was like hilarious. They're like, actually, I think Annie more than anybody was like, okay, look in my eyes, look in my eyes.
Yeah.
The ledge. Right. And I was like, okay, I got this. And it took like a weekend of letting myself feel all the panic and everything that went along with it. And I didn't fight it. Like my wife was like, what in the hell? I'm like, I got to go through this. So just give me the weekend.
Yeah.
By Monday, but I need to. And I went through it. And by Monday I was fine.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, let's do it.
You really can't get around that, right? Like,
no,
we don't talk about this enough. I love that you're talking about this because we see on social media, like, oh, it looks all perfect and lovely and curated. But like those of us who are in it, like we're in the trenches most of the time, flinging mud, trying to figure out what the heck is happening. And you can't just skip out on the hard parts. Like you actually have to go through them. You have to feel the feelings. Like if you don't feel the feelings, you're going to feel them the next time they roll around because they inevitably will, right? So yeah, I love that you're talking about this and not painting it as if it's like some easy thing. Like it's hard to scale and grow your business.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that with consistency. Yes. And so scary.
It was scary. I remember, so I'm doing the challenge and it's July now. This is probably going to air in October. So back in July, I did the challenge. We probably going to have another challenge in October, but we were doing the challenge. And when I put the challenge in play initially, I didn't know because I never ran a workshop. I had like no idea what it entailed. And then it was like, okay, how do we take payment? And I need to see. And when I realized all the things that I needed, it was like, I'm not ready for this.
Yeah.
So I pushed everything out 3 weeks and gave myself the time to do what I needed to do, which included melting down and figuring the things out. But I mean, and I think the cool thing about it is what you said. You have to go through it. There's no way around. Either you're going to go through it or you're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think it came for me. It was like really okay. Here's the fork.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the fork. You're either doing this or you're doing this. And there was no doubt which way I was going to go, but it was just really, letting myself feel it all. And when I speak to other entrepreneurs and we have a conversation, it's like, oh man, I remember that, I was there and it really sucked. And I said, it did. And I gave myself the time that I needed to give myself. I probably could have given myself a little more time, but I didn't have the time to give myself way more time. So I did what I had to do. And it's just interesting looking at it from this 360-degree view, right? As opposed to, just like a 90-degree angle looking straight at it going, oh, okay. And now it's kind of like, okay, so this is what it looks like.
Yeah. One of the things you said that I think is super important is that you recognize that you weren't ready. And I think there's this crazy push right now where people are saying, you've got to scale, you've got to scale, you've got to scale. But most people actually do not have what they need in place in order to do that effectively. They don't have systems. They don't have operational processes. They don't have the tech in some cases. Quite frankly, a lot of people don't even have the strategy or the clarity. And so it's like we're rushing to scale, but we're not actually ready. And I think this is doing us a disservice because then we get to that place and all of a sudden customer service declines, like all these things start to shift.
Yes.
And so the fact that you gave yourself the time to slow it down and you recognize like, yeah, okay, sometimes we can piecemeal it. Sometimes we can, make it happen bit by bit. But for the most part, we really need to be more strategic about what scaling looks like and what are the implications of that for the business, for us as humans, for our employees, if we have them. Like we just need to pause sometimes and get perspective that there's no rush to scale. We think there is, but there isn't really.
Right.
And so, I really appreciate you saying, that you push the pause button a little bit to get some stuff in place in order to do that work more effectively.
Well, and I think, the part of that was, if this was like 8 years ago, I might not have.
Yeah.
I might have just been like, okay, let's go and let's scale. And then be like,
Yeah.
and then have all the Humpty Dumpty fall off the wall. But I think being in business as long as I have and having the different mentorships and examples, right, of what it looks like to run a successful business and how to get where you want to go without pressing the rush button, right, without hitting turbo.
Yep.
And I didn't even realize I was there until I realized I was there. And that was when it was, the panic time. And it was like, okay, we are not ready. We're pushing this challenge out 3 weeks. I called a meeting with our team and everybody who was involved with this. And they said, that's probably a really good idea. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to panic this weekend and I'll get back to you Monday. And that was it. But I think the really cool thing about it is that when somebody asks me, I had a meeting today actually with somebody who was like, you're an entrepreneur and you've been doing this. And what are all the things? And I said, don't rush it. That was like my biggest thing was don't rush it. Because if you rush it, you're going to go too fast. A wise person once told me you have to go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally. Yes.
And he was 100% right. Because if you just go fast to go fast, you're going to overlook things. Balls are going to get dropped. Things are going to fall through the cracks. But if you take your time and really give yourself that grace to figure out what your vision is, I think you're golden. I think that's kind of what I am now. I'm still a little, there's like still moments where I'm like, I still have to do a couple more things, but it's not paralyzing anymore. Now it's kind of like, okay, we're going to do this. We're just going to, kind of pace it. So,
well, I think that's on point because, I think there's this perception that you're going to start a business and it's just going to be a success overnight. I mean, this is my big beef with celebrity entrepreneurs. Like they're preaching a message that is actually super harmful and doesn't really paint the reality. Like they're teaching techniques and strategies that they used when those kinds of things worked and they don't work now. Right. And it really feels disingenuous to me. So, I have worked, that I mentioned I've had a couple of different iterations of my business. And the very first iteration when I started working with female founders was helping them start their businesses, like make the leap from corporate into entrepreneurship. And I talked a lot about really making sure that you build a solid foundation, right? There's this belief that we can just go out, get clients and make money. And, sometimes you do get lucky, right? You have a ready-made client when you leave corporate and it works for you. But the downside to that is that you don't take any of the time that you need to really lay a firm foundation for the business. And so all of a sudden you're trucking along, that client contract ends and you have nothing in place, right, to really keep the business going. And so, I'm a huge believer in laying firm foundations, making sure you have a strategy, having some clarity around your mission. Like, why are you doing this business? What is the impact that you're trying to create in the world? What are your values? And like using those things as sort of the filter or the lens that shapes all of your decision making. So, I just think slowing down, especially in the early stages, despite the fact that we just want to go, 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 we want to be successful, we want to make the money, like all of those things. I just, I think about my experience as an entrepreneur myself. I think about the work I've done with like literally hundreds of people now who have made the leap, started businesses, growing businesses. And I don't know a single unicorn who, woke up one day and they were bringing in 7 figures. Like that's just not a thing that actually happens. And I think we need to stop painting, that imagery for people who are really trying to do it, because it's super damaging and potentially closes the door for people who would otherwise have a really important message to bring to the table, really big impact that they could be making.
Yeah. And it's, you're right. It is damaging, and it's almost like a look at me, I did this. And it's like, yeah, but it didn't, let's be real. This did not happen overnight.
Exactly.
Years and years and years of work. And when I see that, I roll my eyes, because it's like, okay, whatever, like the guys on Shark Tank, right? It's like, because this conversation did happen before the show, but okay, whatever, you just do what you want to do. No offense, Shark Tank. So don't sue me. I was just making an example. I didn't even know that's a thing. But so, we're speaking about entrepreneurship and stuff, and we know what made you decide to become an entrepreneur. What advice do you have for people who are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur? Because there are so many people out there that, you're right, they're in corporate and they're not happy and they want to figure out how to make an impact. Or maybe it's not a necessity, right? They don't have a job now and they're trying to figure something out.
Yeah. Well, I think those are sort of two different cases. So if you're in corporate now and you are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, one of the phrases I used to use a lot was your corporate exit strategy as opposed to a corporate escape plan. Because I think a lot of us think, oh, I've just got to get out of here. And sometimes there's a legitimate reason, like you're in a toxic work environment. There's a lot of reasons why that might be the case. But I think when we're more intentional about why we're leaving and what we're walking toward, as opposed to what we're trying to run away from, that becomes a really important piece to the puzzle. And then giving yourself the time to build a really solid plan. Like, what is your strategy? Lay those foundations like I talked about, and make sure that you have the financial bandwidth to actually do this, right? The worst thing that you could do is, try to start a business and, need to be generating revenue on day one. The chances of that happening are super slim, almost none. Yeah. And so I really encourage people to make sure that you have a runway so that you aren't working out of scarcity the entire time. Like, we want to be able to show up as the best version of ourselves if we are the front face of the business. Now, if you are trying to build a business out of necessity, that's a little bit different story, because some of those same things that we just talked about, having you do still need a plan. You do still need to know like what the business is going to do, why it exists, who it's serving, et cetera. But that may mean that you need to amp up your visibility efforts. It may mean that you need to get very, out there in front of people in a much more proactive way than maybe you would if you, were just, slowly easing in. So that might mean really ramping up your social media presence, really ramping up your networking, reaching out to your network and asking for introductions. Like that, that's going to require a completely different type of momentum than someone who's slowly easing in from corporate to entrepreneurship and they have the time and the bandwidth to do it. So I think taking a look at what your circumstance requires of you from a financial perspective, because let's be honest, we're running businesses to make money and hopefully to make an impact. So recognizing what you need, like knowing your numbers and making sure that you have a plan to help you get there, and then amping up the sales and marketing piece to match what you need that to be. I think that's probably what I would recommend the most.
Cool. I love that. And, it's funny because I think for me, when I first started this, it was necessity, and it was like 10 years ago, and it's taken 10 years. Because people are like, oh my God, you're so successful and you're so this. And I'm like, this was not easy. I said, it's still not easy.
Yeah.
Yes, started out of necessity. Yes, I had a really good client base. You know what? The first 6 months was amazing. And then I had shoulder surgery. And then my pipeline disappeared because I was high for a month. I mean, I had no idea what was going on. And I was on these like painkillers because my shoulder was really messed up. So I couldn't talk to clients. I was out of my mind. I think I spoke to one client and they're like, hi. And I said, I talked to you in February. And they were like, yeah, let's talk in February. But I watched my pipeline like disappear. And after I came out of my fog, I had to rebuild my pipeline, and it took a long time.
Yeah.
And being where I am now, and building my reputation that took years.
Yeah.
For people to know me and to like me, to trust me, and to know that they're safe. That's one of my biggest things. I have my vision board here, and one of the main things I have where I have my business piece is that my clients are safe.
Yeah.
Because that to me is the most important thing, that they know they're well taken care of, that, they know that they're in a safe space, that if they're not happy with something, they can tell me.
Yeah.
Because I can't fix it. I can't fix it if I don't know that it's broken.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Yes, you did. Yeah.
So
no, that's so good. And, just the fact that you're saying it took 10 years, like it takes a freaking long time. Like most people who have kind of hit that turning point are 5, 6, 7 years in. And that's what I mean, when we're kind of painting this picture of like quick entrepreneurship, like you might have early success, but to get long-term success, it is a slow game. And it's one where we have to be consistent. We have to keep showing up. We have to keep doing, even when it feels like garbage, and I'm not saying that in a, burn yourself out kind of way. Right? Talking about from a self-care perspective, but like we need to be consistent. We need to keep showing up. We need to keep doing. And I find that there's a lot of stop and go in those early years as you're figuring things out, as you're testing and trialing and refining and scrapping and, all of that. And it takes time to be able to see the fruits of your labor. I firmly believe, I was in a business partnership for a couple of years, and I firmly believe that when we parted ways, I was able to keep my business going because I had been consistent. People had been seeing me for 3, 4 years, showing up every day on social media, in email, etc. And right around that 5-year mark is where I start to see the turning point. And it's not that I wasn't successful in the lead up to that. It wasn't like that we weren't, making money before, but it wasn't until, a lot of pieces had slotted together. I found my voice. I understood who I was trying to serve. I knew how to communicate those offers. I knew what the problems were for business owners, in particular, in my particular niche. And then I was not afraid to talk about those things anymore. Like that comes from years of testing and trialing. It comes from, having the ups and downs and the failures and, the struggles, right? It's so that's, when we're looking at how to grow a business and what it really takes, it's that level of perseverance. I call it strength of will, your commitment, your discipline, your willingness to do what it takes for however long it takes.
Right.
All of that stuff matters, and it starts to shape how we show up. And it comes back to some of those deeper beliefs that we have about what we're doing and why we're doing it, which is why I think, doing that initial foundational work of impact and why and the big idea and all those things is so, so important.
See, and I think, like, for me, it took a lot of inner work.
Mm-hmm.
It took a lot of, because I thought, not that I didn't know, I think I knew who I was, but I don't think I knew what made me tick.
Yeah.
And I don't think I knew really my values, which was weird because you would think, of course, you know your values, but things change, right? As we grow, things change. I started mindfulness, during COVID, very first year. I've been doing it ever since. And that helped me really kind of stop and pause and really look inside and kind of confront my demons.
Yep.
And, I got sick with COVID. I didn't realize like for a year, I thought I was going to die. So there was like a lot of different things that, that played a part. But I think that the biggest thing for me and, with my growth with the business was being able to say, these are my values. If people's values don't align with me, I don't want to, nor do I have to work with them.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that for me was the biggest thing, because I used to take jobs just to take them because, I needed the money.
Yeah.
And of course, we all always need money. But when I got to the point that I was like, I'm not going to work with people who I don't align with, it changed everything.
Yeah.
Because then the right people started coming into my orbit. The right people started becoming my clients. And I'm picky. I had some, and people laugh all the time. I'm like, I probably turn 2 people down a week.
Yeah.
Because I just know, just know after 10 minutes.
Yeah. If there's a mismatch in energy and values,
Right.
it actually doesn't serve you as the business owner, but it doesn't serve them either. Right.
Yeah.
I had a situation where, I was working with someone and it was very clear. It wasn't clear in the consultation, but it was clear after that, we were not aligned on like sort of the way we view humans.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a huge eye opener for me, because not only was it difficult to have, to see where this person was coming from, but I just found myself constantly in a state of friction. And so, but, it took a while to get to that point where I could be like, okay, you know what, going forward, it's very clear to me that I cannot work with someone who fill in the blank, right? I need this person to have these core values or some semblance of them. But that's a bit of a luxury that comes with having some financial stability, right? Like I hear a lot of people talking about like only work with your ideal client. I'm like, well, I agree with that sentiment, but there are definitely periods of time where you don't have that luxury.
Right.
And I think it's a false, again, it's like a false idea to think like, when you're out there trying to figure out who your business is for you to be like, I'm only working with these people. Well, that may not be the right crew. So yeah, coming back to that values alignment piece is just so important. And I think, when you said like doing that inner work, I mean, what's that saying, like entrepreneurship is the greatest like personal development or personal growth tool you can have. Like, gosh, you learn so much about yourself and like what you're capable of, who you really are, your level of grit, determination, like all those things, like it all comes out in this process. Cause like, it's really hard sometimes.
It is. And it's so funny, Fabienne Raphael is my coach, and she's been my coach for like 6 months. And she put this post out on LinkedIn, and it was about me, and it was about my determination and how I did. And I'm reading this going, who's that? Because it's like,
yes,
you don't think of the things that you do. It's like, I'm just doing, right? I'm being, and I never like label it.
Yeah.
And I read that thing and I was like bawling at the end. I was like, holy shit, that is me.
Well, it just comes back to, we don't see ourselves clearly.
Oh, no. But it was just like such an aha moment for me. Like my work is, all my hard work has been hard work. Like it hasn't been a walk in the woods.
Sure.
It is. There it is. So it was like this, it was like such a great moment for me, not to see the accolades and all that. It had nothing to do with that, but it was seeing like all of my effort in front of me. It was just like, whoa,
And to see that someone sees that.
Yes.
Like, that you're doing it. And, we do have a tendency to downplay, but the fact that other people noticed that you were, doing it, that's where some of the magic really is.
It was Well, um, this this phone only rings when I have a freaking podcast on because it's a landline, and it's like we have it for an emergency if there's like a tornado and the lines get blown down. It is like so funny. Anyway, um, but yeah, it's just like it was kind of like a mirror, and I show my wife, and she's like, yeah, and
Like they already know this
a
about
little
you.
excited about this for me, and she's like, but it's no, this is what I see every day.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. So it was like extremely deflating almost because I was like, oh, look at what she wrote, and she was like,
Right.
yeah, and I was like,
Yeah,
thanks.
I know.
Thanks for that. But so okay, so we all go through obstacles, right?
Yep.
We're entrepreneurs. So what's like an obstacle that you've overcome that a seasoned entrepreneur who's listening to this maybe going through and they kind of
Yeah, that's a
figure out
great
the other side?
question. Yeah. Um, well, maybe one of the most obvious is, well, maybe there's two. Um, investing in things that you think you need, and them not quite panning out the way you thought they would. I've had a number of experiences like that where, I've invested lots of money, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, and it really hasn't materialized.
Mhm.
I don't see those things as necessarily negative. They feel negative, but they aren't necessarily negative because, they teach you a lot about yourself and, there's a lot of lessons learned there. But I think it's really hard to go through that and feel like you're a bit of a failure or that you didn't make a good decision, especially if you're a people pleaser or a goody two shoes, kind of like I am. So, I've had cases where I have done that and I just look back and I'm like, what were you thinking? And so having to work through the emotions that come with that and rebuilding the confidence, I think that's one. I think
Rebuilding the confidence. That's like,
I mean, it's so huge because now all of a sudden
Wow.
it's like, can I trust myself to make decisions? Like I didn't make a good decision there. Can I trust myself to make the next decision? And I think you have to work through, cases like that because
wow.
it really does, especially if it's, especially if it's like a big chunk of cash or, maybe it's just a really hard situation. You're like, I really wish I wouldn't have gone through that. In the moment, that's what we're thinking. Or, oh, I just feel so dumb for doing that.
Right.
It creates this question mark in your mind, like, do I know what I'm doing? Am I really capable of making these kinds of decisions? So I think you
syndrome.
yeah, so much. And so I think we have to do the work to acknowledge, like, what did we gain from this? Acknowledge that, like, it freaking hurt. It freaking sucked. Like all of that. And rebuild the confidence that goes with it. I think the other obstacle is really knowing when you need to shift. And I've made a couple of shifts. I worked with corporate clients for a lot of years. And there came a point where I was like, I don't want to keep doing this anymore. And honoring the fact that you don't want to do it and what it means to let go of those clients from a revenue perspective. That was a shift. I had a second shift where I had a partnership and that worked for a while. And then we decided we needed to part ways. And knowing when is the right time to do that and the right way to do that, it's really important. And knowing when the work is no longer the kind of work you want to do. So I think being gentle with yourself in that process and recognizing like there's going to be a dip, there's going to be some hard growth that has to happen as you're making those shifts, pivoting your audience, pivoting your message, all that. To me, the obstacle is letting yourself make the change, right? And I'll give you an example. So in, I guess it would have been November of last year, I was looking at my business. It was exactly what I had built. I had a vision. I built it. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't love what I've built here. It's successful. It's making a lot of money. But this question, impact kept coming up. Like I wanted to see something different. I just kept thinking, why did I build this thing? It's sort of like, why did I climb the corporate ladder? It's like same kind of questions, just in different context. And I looked at my business, I looked at the numbers, and I just thought, I cannot keep running this business this way. I just don't love it.
Wow.
And in December, I closed my biggest revenue generation pieces of the biggest revenue generating pieces of the business. And everything slowed way down. But I knew I was doing the right thing. It was hard. It didn't feel good. I was stressed. I had a lot of like, are you doing the right thing? A lot of imposter syndrome, all of that was coming up. But I just knew deep in my gut that it was the right decision.
Mhm.
And if I wouldn't have given myself the permission to do that, I don't think I would be here today because I just was not loving it anymore. I felt burned out, stressed, etc. So to me, some of those obstacles are paying attention and knowing when it's not working for you anymore. And not from a, I'm just going to give up kind of thing, but more from a, this isn't what I want it to be. And the whole benefit of having a business is that we build it by design. We don't have to default to what we've always done, what we did in corporate, what we, fill in the blank. We get to decide. So I think those are some of those obstacles of, allowing yourself to recover in the confidence zone and to know when it's not working, that I think are really important to long-term growth and sustainability.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. I know you're talking about with like spending money. I can't, if I say what it is, people are going to know what I'm talking about, but I spent a chunk on something that just, I didn't get the results that I wanted. And it was like a lot of money. And especially for me, as in this like little growth spurt that I'm in, to drop thousands of dollars is like a lot of freaking money.
Yeah.
For something not to work.
Yeah.
And so I've had someone say, well, it hasn't worked yet. It doesn't mean that it won't work in the future. And well, yeah, but I needed it to do something and it didn't do what I needed to do. But I never felt like I didn't trust myself. I kind of looked at it as a lesson.
Yeah.
I was like, if I didn't learn from it, then it's a mistake. And this is what I try to tell everybody, right? If you don't learn from it, then yeah, you can say you made a mistake. But if you learn from it, it's a lesson.
Yeah.
And as business owners, we're getting lessons every freaking day of our lives.
That's the truth. Oh my goodness.
It goes by that it's like, oh my God, what was I? I remember I had a meeting with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, okay, I'm going to be working with this person. I think it's going to be really, really awesome, kind of like you. And then, no, that you saw something after, and you were like, oh, that's not who I thought they were.
Yeah.
And we had started working together already.
Yeah.
And we were in like the beginning stage, and I was like, I'm going to give a refund.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to. And it was like it was a fluke. Like I never would have, if I didn't pop on Facebook, like at that moment, I never would have seen it because we're not fighting on Facebook or anything. So I think the universe was like, pay attention.
Totally.
This is what's going on. Because I looked at it and I was like, wait, that can't be the same person. And I started looking and it was the same person. I was like, son of a
yikes. Yeah.
Right. And then it was like, how do I handle this?
Yeah. It's so hard.
So I called him up and I was like, hi. And I usually don't have a little voice. And he's like, hey, lady. And I said, yeah, this isn't a good conversation. And he goes, well, what do you mean? I said, I kind of feel that we're not going to work well together.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? We had an amazing meeting. And I said, yeah, but some things have come up that I don't think mesh.
Yeah.
And then he asked me, and I just told him flat out.
Yeah.
He said, you're going to let that stop you? And I said, yeah, like 100%. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And he said, well, I want a refund. I said, already on the way.
Yep.
Already on the way.
But kudos to you for having that conversation, right? Like you could have sucked it up, just said, you know what, I don't like it, but I'm going to press on. But you didn't.
This was too extreme.
Yeah. And I think that's where some of the courage of, being in the trenches, you get that courage from there. Like it doesn't feel good in the moment when you're doing it, but man, the relief on the other end, knowing that you honored yourself in that is so important.
Yeah, but what bothered me was that it got past me in the first place.
Yeah, I get that.
Because, I mean, we make our living not judging people, but judging situations.
Yeah. Well, trying to read the room and make sure that's a good.
Yes, thank you. That's a better way to put it. But there are just certain lines that are not crossable for me. This was like
same. Yes. But and I think that's, back to some of our earlier conversation, that's the work. It's knowing who you are and what your boundaries are as an entrepreneur. That's, and being willing to honor those. I was on vacation last week and I had sent all my clients an email that I was going to be offline for 2 weeks because of family situation and then vacation. Right. And every single client honored it except one. And this person, emailed me a bunch of different times. And I was like, on principle, I'm not responding to a single one.
Good.
Because there's a boundary here. Like I have a value that family time is important rejuvenation time. I spend a lot of my time serving others. And sometimes my family just needs me to be here and fully present. And just the fact that there was like that lack of honoring was so telling. And let's be honest, a couple of years ago, I would have been right on that, responding to that, email, et cetera. And it's, when you know who you are, when you know what you want as a business leader and what those boundaries are that are not crossable, that's when I think we can start to shift the energy and the leadership of the company, right? Because now we're not acquiescing all the time. We are really embracing our role as the leader of the company.
So last week we were in Pittsburgh and my wife had something for work and I had, I was basically off. I worked every single day. I chose to. And I said to her, at one point she got annoyed and I said, the good thing about your job is when you're off, you're off. You may take a phone call here and there, but I'm still in growth mode. And so I'm going to work. So we're going to Disney World in September. I am not working that week. Like that week is like off limits because we're doing Star Wars and all the things.
Yeah, totally.
Right. I'm giving myself that time. We went to Hawaii in November. I worked one day. I thought Kofi was going to kill me because I called him. He said, what the hell is wrong with you? You're in Hawaii. And I'm like, yeah, we're in a traffic jam. I got the ocean to the left. I got the mountains to the right. We should probably work on this. And he was like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? But I chose to do that. Right. And then really we couldn't work because Hawaii's 5 hours behind.
Yeah.
So by the time I'm getting up and our day has started and people are like going home from work.
That's right.
Like, again, the universe was like, you are taking that time. My wife also, she couldn't take calls. Last week I chose to work. The challenge was this week, there were a lot of things that I was doing, a lot of meetings that I wanted to take. So I chose to take them. But again, it's my choice. In September when we're in Disney, I'm bringing an iPad. I'm not even bringing my computer. Yeah. So if I have to answer an email, I can, but I'm not, working. And again, it's my choice, but I'm not at the point yet that I have a COO and I could be like, run things and let me know, what I mean? I'll be there in a year. Yeah. I'm confident of that, but I'm not there right now. So I do it for now. And it's okay because again, that's part of the process. It's part of the growth. And I love what I'm doing. So
yeah. I love that.
So I got a couple more questions because we're like an hour. And we're less than an hour because we had that thing in the beginning. But so what is your differentiator? Like I already know what it is, and I think you've already said it, but for, people listening and, they want to work with somebody and you're really not a coach. I mean, how would you describe what you do? Because you're not like a business coach.
Yeah, I've actually never really used that term for myself. I think if I had to give myself a label, I would probably say I am more of like a consultant strategist. Like I really like to get into the nitty gritty of people's businesses, figure out what's not working, and then build a plan to help them get where they're trying to go. So, in terms of differentiators, I think there's a couple of things. I have a very strategic perspective when I look at business and can take those really complicated pieces of the business that aren't working and help people build a very step-by-step kind of plan that allows them to implement effectively. I think that's one thing. I think another thing, and this comes back to something we talked about already, which is really around that impact piece. And that is that I'm very clear on the work I'm trying to do. Like I care deeply about gender equality and making sure that women in developing countries have the opportunity to, like I said, use their voice, their expertise, their skills to create real opportunities for themselves. And so a lot of the work that I do, supporting women here in the US or in the developed world, I should say, because I'm not just here in the US, that work, is me choosing to work with the kind of women who share that kind of a vision.
Right.
But it also enables me to pour resources into organizations that are supporting women who are trying to move themselves into the field of entrepreneurship, tackling issues that prevent women from being able to step into their role. Things like menstrual equity, making sure we have access to the tools and resources and mentorship we need. So, when I talk a lot about those kinds of things, that's what draws people in because they're like, oh, I get that. I care about that too. I want to work with someone who feels the same way. So, and if I had to add a third thing in there, I'll just call it warmth. It's a characteristics that I've had that I kind of cultivated early in my career doing group facilitation. I needed people to be able to disarm and engage in the process. Usually these were like processes that were very political. There was a lot at stake and people came in armed and defensive, and I found quickly that I had this ability to help people relax and lean into the process. And I don't have a good name for it other than warmth. That's what I call it in my own mind.
Soothing. You're very soothing.
And so I feel like with those three pieces, it's sort of like my little trifecta of, really being able to help people lean into the process, recognize that we're going to get them where they're trying to go in a step-by-step kind of fashion. And then I'm doing it for a larger purpose.
I love that so much. And and that was why I introduced you to Rhino.
Yeah.
Because we had that in common. And I just love everything that you stand for, and I adore you as a person. So
thank you.
I do. And then I want to thank you for taking time today. I know it's, you're busy and we're all busy and we all, have time and time is important. And it really means a lot that you took the time to be with me and my audience today. Yeah. And the last question I ask all my guests is, what lights your fire?
So, oh gosh, I feel like I could talk about this for days, but when I think about the landscape that we're in an era where women are really in a time and a place where we can shift the narrative. Like there are a lot of institutional and cultural barriers that keep us kind of playing small. But there's a deep desire by women and a need for women to step up and be bold. And I feel like when I can be just a small part of helping a woman do that, getting on the TEDx stage with her big idea, creating a business that allows her to have the kind of impact she wants to make, supporting women who are really trying to, at the most basic, support their family or create some kind of educational opportunity or whatever that might look like in the developing world. All of those kinds of things. It's like, I just feel like I could talk about it for days. I just want to do all that. If I didn't have to make money, I would just be doing all the volunteering, because like there's something magical that happens when women really step fully into, it sounds so cliche, when we step fully into our power, but like when we really embrace who we are and what we're capable of, and we can build a business around that. I mean, that's just like the magic is happening. So, being a part of that process for another woman and to walk alongside her in that journey, to me, is just like the greatest gift. And the more I can do that, the better.
That is beautiful. Okay, so how do people find you?
So I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. I'm just Jess-Sato on LinkedIn. And my website is jessicasato.com. Those are probably the two best places to find me. And there's loads of resources on my website if you're really thinking about going the social impact route or need support in that way. But LinkedIn is where I spend the bulk of my time.
And you have a VIP strategy day?
I do, yes. So the way I primarily work with clients is through these VIP strategy days where we dig in, half day, full day into, what is the thing that you're trying to do? What's not working? We get into the nitty gritty, like I said, and really figure out how to go from point A to point B, Z, whatever point you're trying to get to, and build a really solid plan to do that without compromising the impact that you're trying to make.
Well, that is amazing. Thank you for being here. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience and I will be right back.
Thank you.
Okay, so everybody, thank you so much for being here again, an hour plus. I hope that through this you've learned to adore and get to know Jess as well as I do. I think she's amazing. I think her whole mission of impact is huge. I want to thank each and every one of you again for hanging out, for downloading, but subscribe. When you subscribe, you get a notification that a new episode dropped, and it helps my numbers because I have like all these downloads, but not a lot of subscribers. So I'm just being real with y'all. Subscribe, and can't wait to see you next time when we have our next guest. And until the next time I see you, go out and find what lights your fire. Goodbye, everyone.